right, we're just going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome. Happy Friday. All right, so today's webinar is going to talk about using some of those more advanced features in Google Classroom. So, specifically, we're going to focus in on those options with your gradebook. In your settings, you have the ability to turn on grading categories and then to turn on the ability to weight those categories. So, we'll look at that. We'll look at something called Originality Reports, which allows you to check for plagiarism. And so that's a really cool feature. And we'll look at what it looks like on the student end and then also what it looks like on the teacher end. We'll talk about that rubric function when you're creating an assignment and the different ways that you can attach a rubric. And then the last part I want to talk about is using the Google Classroom app on a mobile device or tablet, because it does allow you some different functionality than what you have on a computer. So for example, it's not just PDFs, you can annotate on top of assignments. So you can go in and you can circle and draw using your finger. And then what it will do is it will push that back to your students as a PDF, so they'll be able to see all of your feedback on their assignment that way. So we'll look at that. And then we'll also look at how the Google Classroom app allows you to receive notifications. That is one of the flaws of using Google Classroom in Fort Worth ISD. All of those wonderful notifications that come with Google Classroom get sent to your email, which is awesome, except that we don't have access to our Google email. So we never see all of those notifications. However, if you're using the app on a phone or a tablet, you get push notifications instead. And so we'll look at the power of that. So lots to cover. Again, I'm not really sure, as usual, how long this will take. It might take the full hour. It might not. It will kind of depend on questions and how much exploring we end up doing. So with that in mind, I am going to go ahead and open up a Google Classroom to play in. So if you're going to work alongside me, you'll want to do the same. So I'm going to go in to my Google Classroom. And I believe I was already playing in this one. So this is the one we'll use today. All right, so the first part we're going to look at is that gradebook feature and the different options you have. So starting on my stream or my landing page that I was taken to when I clicked on that class, I'm going to go over to my gear or my cog. So all of my settings are found here for this class. And when you click on that, we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom section. So that last section is all about grading. And it looks like I've already turned it on in this class. So I think the default is for it to have no overall grade, and therefore you should not see any grading categories. Let me go into a class that doesn't have this turned on yet. That way we can look at it from that fresh view, and then we'll come back to it. All right, let's try this one. There we go. Okay, so the default will look like this. It will have no overall grade selected here. This will be off, and then you won't have any categories. So to turn it on so that we can now have grading categories and weights. So this will allow us to make our Google Classroom gradebook match up with our focus gradebook. I can go into overall grade calculation. I can decide, do I want an overall grade to be calculated? Do I want it based on just total points? Or to make it match, or at least closely match your focus gradebook, you'd want to turn on that weighted by category. And once you do that, now we have the option to show that overall grade to our students. I would probably suggest you keep this off for now, just in case it doesn't match up perfectly with what happens in focus. I would wait to kind of test it out and see. Things I'm not sure about, you can't really make an assignment exempt in Google Classroom, and you can't mark them incomplete in Google Classroom. You just give them no grade. So the exempt issue right there is what I'm worried about. Because you can't make something exempt, everything gets calculated into their overall grade. And so I don't know how that will affect their overall grade in Google Classroom versus in Focus, where you have marked them exempt. So kind of with that said, you may want to choose to have this turned off so that your students can't necessarily see what their final grade is in Google Classroom. It forces them to look in Focus. Underneath that, we have the option now to add grade categories. So because I turned it on to weighted by category, I can now add those grade categories and give them a particular weight. So to do it, it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to click on Add Grade Category. And then you want to choose the same grading categories that you have in your focus gradebook. So if it's something like classwork, and then you'll want to choose that same percentage. So let's say that classwork is worth, I'm just making things up, 60%. Okay. And then we can keep on adding categories. It does tell us that we still have 40% left to fill. So I want to make sure I get to that 100%. Let's say our tests are worth 30%. And then let's go ahead and say homework is worth 10%. Okay. And now I have 0% remaining. Now I'm able to save it. So you do want to make sure these add up to 100% in order to be able to save. All right, so I set those categories. Let's look at how that affects everything else. It looks like I have a couple of people who have joined us a little bit late. So just kind of to recap, and in fact, I'm going to give it about 10 seconds here before I recap because it looks like they're just joining now. All right, so to recap real quick, these are the 4 things that we're exploring today. We're starting right now with your grading options, and we're talking about how can I make my Google Classroom gradebook somewhat, or at least as closely as possible, aligned to my focus gradebook, and we can do so by adding categories and weights. All right, and that person who just joined us left, so. And then we'll look into these other 3 options in just a minute. So anyways, I'm in my class settings right now, so I accessed a class that I wanted to work in. And then I went to the class settings. I changed my overall grade calculation. So this is at the bottom section of my settings here in grading. I changed this so that it says weighted by category. And then I added those categories and then was able to add those percentages. All right, so now I'm going to go save. I think I recapped that. Okay, so now that I've saved that, I have the ability whenever I create a new assignment to add a category to it. So I'll show you in this class what it looks like to do that, and then we'll go back to the other one that already had them created. So I'm just going to choose a category or an assignment I already have. So if you do this after the fact, you are able to go in and categorize them later. So here's my, I don't even know what this is. Okay, here's just this random assignment. It's not even a real one. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit the assignment. So I'm going to select the 3 dots that align with that assignment there and go to edit. Okay, and this window should look familiar, but this is new. Down underneath where it says who I'm assigning it to, it used to just tell me that it's worth this many points. Now I also have the ability to select a grade category. So I can say that this assignment is a test, and it will automatically calculate that to be, I think I said, what was that, 30% of their grade? So 30% of their final grade. Okay, so I can identify that category there. And then when I save it, it will be part of that category in my gradebook. So let me go back to my other class where I've already got this set up so we can kind of see that. Okay. So once I have categorized an assignment, I can see that in my gradebook. So at the top of my Google Classroom here, I have those 4 different tabs. I'm going to go over to the grades one to see my gradebook. All right, and then in my gradebook, I have not categorized all of them, but you'll see underneath the name of the assignment, it will tell me which category it belongs to. So this one belongs to classwork. Classwork, classwork. This one doesn't have a category. That means that I need to give it a category. I'm going to click on the 3 dots next to the assignment and edit it. And then I'll give it that category. So I'll call this one a test. And when I do that in my gradebook now, it shows that category. And again, because I have given those categories different weights, based on how that student has done on that assignment, it will change his overall grade. So if classwork is 60%, it's going to calculate whatever that is as 60% of their grade. So that allows it to align a little bit better to focus. Again, with the focus gradebook, it takes into account things that you have marked as exempt. And that is not something you can do in Google Classroom. So I'm not exactly sure how that would affect the final overall grade. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're doing this, but it is a way to make it at least better match what's going on in your focus gradebook. All right. I know a couple of you joined in a little late there. What questions do you have about grades? Are there any steps you want me to repeat to add those different categories and then give them weights? And I'm realizing right now I don't even have my chat open. Let me open that up. There we go. Okay. All right. Perfect. So with that in mind, if you have further questions, please put them in, but I don't see any yet. So I'm going to continue on. So that was our grading options. So our different categories and weights. We did look at our gradebook fairly in depth when we were going over, I think our last Google Classroom webinar. But just kind of keep in mind, you are able to grade within the gradebook tab, the grades tab here. So I can go in and see exactly which assignments I have not yet graded. And if he has turned them in on time, then I'll see a score out of 100, so blank out of 100. That'll tell me I can go in and grade that. So I can either just give him a grade, or I can see his submission with those 3 dots. I can view that submission to then grade it. I'm just going to give him an 80. All right, if I do grade in here, it will save that grade as a draft. So as a reminder for my students to see that grade, I will need to return it. I can also do that right within my grade tab by clicking on the 3 dots and then return. And notice that there are keyboard shortcuts for all of these things. So they try to make it really quick and efficient for teachers. All right, and then also notice that the assignments that are past their due date that are not submitted are marked as missing in nice big red bold letters. So it's a great way to get a kind of a snapshot of how your class is doing and turning things in. Now, obviously, I only have 1 student in this class, but if I had more, it'd be a really good way for me to come in and say, ooh, you know, I need to touch base with this student, look at all of these missing assignments. So just a kind of a quick and easy way to see that. It also will tell me if a student has submitted something late. So done late is that indication. Then again, that check mark is for assignments that are not graded. So those are the ones that I indicated as ungraded when I created them. So some different things to look for in your gradebook. Okay. All right, I think we kind of looked at our gradebook as much as we need to. Are there questions about your gradebook view? Or what functionality you have in your gradebook view? All right. Awesome. Then let's go ahead and look at our next option. So moving on to number 2 in our agenda today, we're going to look at what are called originality reports. And so when we were creating assignments, you may remember, let me go in here. Here we go. You may remember in your assignment creation window here, we kind of skipped over these last 2 options in our previous webinars because they take some time to explain and we didn't have that time. So the first one we're going to talk about is that originality reports one. This will allow you to catch your students who are plagiarizing by copying things from the internet without citing them. So I have an example of this kind of set up and ready to go. I created this assignment, this book summary assignment. Okay, so I'm going to go in and edit it so you can see what it looks like. So I asked that my students view the attached anchor document, anchor chart, so that they can get a feel for what belongs in a summary. And then I gave them this summary assignment that looks like this. Real simple. Eventually, when it loads. Oh goodness, it's real slow. There we go. Okay, so the directions are at the top, and then they have all the space underneath to write their summary. And so then I finished out the assignment here. I added all of the information on the right-hand side. We're going to come back to that rubric one in a minute. But the important thing here is that I checked off that I would like to include originality reports. My understanding is that we have an unlimited number of originality reports that we can run within our domain. So you'll see out there that there are posts about how you can only run 3 originality reports. I do not believe that's the case for our domain, so you don't have to worry about that. So I checked off originality reports, and then I assigned this assignment. All right, and let's go ahead and let's look at that student view. So this student account, he's going to go to his Google Classroom. I don't know if this is the right one though. It is not. There we go. All right, and in his reading category here, we have that book summary assignment. So that's the one I just showed you on my end. And on his end, this is what he sees. And then because this is the first time I've used originality reports with this class, he's actually getting this little pop-up that tells him that he can run his own. So on the teacher end, I can run this originality report to catch instances of plagiarism, but on the student end, they can also run it to make sure that they haven't plagiarized. So that's kind of a cool feature as well. They can check before they hand it in. So I'm going to say got it. And then notice that that little option here pops up underneath where their work is. So we're going to look at that in just a second. Let's open up his. And hopefully it's saved. Yes. Okay. So I started, you can even tell with the difference in font sizes here, I started the response and then I went and I copied and pasted directly from the internet. So we can kind of see that. So let's say he's done, he wants to go ahead and he wants to turn it in. Before he does, he should come back here and run his originality report. So I clicked on that run button. It does say 3 out of 3. I was under the understanding that they have unlimited, so I'll have to look into that. But for now, it says 3 out of 3, so we'll roll with that. So he has a chance to run 3 of these. I'm going to run it. Okay, and it's going to think for a second. Okay, so it thought for just a minute. What it was doing was it was searching the internet real fast to catch any issues. And then underneath his assignment here, so again, this is the student view. He sees View Originality Report, and this is a hyperlink. So we're going to click on that to open it. And on his end, it's telling him, uh-oh, you have 1 flagged passage. And that flagged passage comes from this website. And it will pull up, here's the passage that I wrote. Here's what the website says. So I can see exactly how badly it was plagiarized. So that's what he sees on his end. My end is very similar. We'll look at that in just a second. But I also want to show you, I can look at it by count. So I have 1 flagged passage. And then I can look at it by percent. I can see how much of his passage is flagged. So that's helpful. Charlene asked, can you check for student-to-student plagiarism? I don't believe it will catch that. We can test it though. Can you remind me of that at the end, Charlene, and we can test that out. I'll pull up 2 different student accounts and I'll type something on one and then we'll try it on the other. So let's try that later, but that's a great question. I'm not sure the answer to that right now. Okay, so that's on the student side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it in. So I'll close out of this and I'm going to turn in his assignment. And now, once it turns in, there we go. I'm going to minimize, and now I'm back on my teacher side here. So on my teacher side, I'm going to open up my assignment. I'm going to view it. And I have this one student turned in, so I'll click on his thumbnail here to see his assignment. All right, and it's loading up here. And then notice that right underneath his name, so over on the right-hand side, I see files. I see here's the file I'm in, and I see that little hyperlink that says 1 flagged passage. So if there is something wrong with his passage, it will tell me 1 flagged passage. That again is hyperlinked. I can click on it, and it will open up that same view we just saw. So I can see what we just saw on the student end. By count, I see 1 flagged passage. I can click on where it came from. I can see, okay, this is the part that was copied and pasted. I can see what his says versus what the website says, and I can even navigate to that site if I wanted to. Right. And then I also have the option to look at what percent of his paper is copied as well. So really, really helpful. It kind of gets rid of there was a website that we used to have to use when I was in college. I can't remember the name of it, but you had to submit your paper and it came back and let you know how much was plagiarized. it kind of takes the place of that, which is really cool. All right, so that's our originality report. Again, I had to turn that on. So let me show you where I turned that on one more time. Okay, in my assignment creation, I had to turn on or check off originality reports for it to work. And then on the teacher end, I opened up this student's assignment and I can see whether there are flagged passages underneath his attachment here. So that's where I went to find that. All right, aside from Charlene's awesome question, what other questions might you have about originality reports? All right. None so far. So I'm not sure how useful that is in our younger elementary grades, but I know in middle and high schools where they really are getting into that paper writing, that's a really, really good feature. So I wish I had that when I was teaching middle school writing back in the day. All right, so let's look at our next thing on our agenda today. So our next option is to look at that rubric section. And again, our rubric section is something that's in our assignment creation window. I have the option to create a rubric here. So I already have one created. I'll show you what it looks like once it's created, and then we'll kind of backtrack and look at creating the rubric. So I already created one using the Google Classroom Rubric Creator tool, which I'll show you in a bit. Okay, so that's already attached to my assignment. And now when I am looking at this student's submission, okay, so we just were a minute ago, notice that underneath grade, here is where my rubric criteria are. So I can decide how did this student do in each aspect of my rubric. So I gave him, there's a category for main character. And so here are the different criteria that I put in there. This is not the best rubric I've ever written, just a heads up, but in a time crunch. So I can decide, okay, I read his passage here and I'll click on main character and I'll decide, okay, where does he fall in my rubric? Well, he named the main character, but I don't really have much in the way of detail. So I'm going to give him a fair. And I can just click on that and it will automatically give him a 1 out of 3 because that's how many points I gave for fair. Okay, and notice that it's also auto updating both the total rubric score, 1 out of 12, and my grade. So that went up from a 0 out of 100 to 8.33. All right, so I'm going to minimize my main character here because I opened up that drop down so I can see the other aspects. So the next category in my rubric is about problem. Okay, and so I want to know, did he identify any problems? Yeah, I see some problems. He identified them. I'm going to say that he did a good job there. We're just kind of making it up as we go here. So I'll go ahead and click on good. It will automatically grant him 2 points. That will update in my total rubric score and in his grade. And now I can close out of that and we'll look at the others. So I'm just going to give him some random grades here just so we can move it along. All right. And now that I've completed all of the rubric categories, notice that it gave him a rubric score and a final grade there based on what I put in my rubric. All right, and so I graded on that rubric right in here. I can also open up my rubric in a new window if I want to see it full, nice and big. Here's the full rubric, just so that if I wanted to go in and see exactly what was involved in my rubric, I could open it there. So I did that by clicking on this little box with an arrow. And then I also had the option, this is like student 6 that I'm grading. At this point, I know what my rubric says by heart. So I know that, first off, my high is up on the left-hand side and my low scores are on the right. I set that when I created the rubric, so I know exactly what a 1 would be or where it is. I can just click those little boxes to give him a score there. I don't have to open it up and read it and click for each one. So once I've memorized that rubric, it makes grading really easy. I can just click and go. Oops. And then I'm done. All right, and then as with any assignment that you've graded, you do want to make sure you return that assignment back to him. In this case, I've only graded one, so I can just click the return button. But if I sat here, I don't have any other students, but if I sat here and graded an entire class worth, I can then go up and return all of them at once with this little drop down arrow on the right hand side. And I could return multiple submissions, so I could return all of the student submissions all at once in one click. All right, but I'll return just his. So that's what the rubric looks like once it's done. Let's look at now creating one. So I'm going to open up a different assignment here. Actually, let's go ahead and create an assignment. So I'm going to create a brand new assignment. Okay, this is just going to be my sample. And now on the bottom right hand corner, to create a rubric, I'm going to click on that plus rubric button. So we're going to pretend like the rest of the assignment's already set up. I'm going to click on plus rubric, and these are my options. I can create a new rubric, which is what we'll look at in just a second. I can reuse a rubric that I already have. So I'm going to select that so we see what that looks like. The rubric that I created for my book summary assignment is listed here. So if I wanted to use that again, I could click on that and select it, or notice that I can choose rubrics that I've used in other classes as well. So if I created one in another class, I can pull it into this class to use. So this is like my little library of rubrics. So I could reuse one, or I do have the option to import it from Sheets. So if you have rubrics already created in something like Google Sheets or even Excel, because Excel can be transferred to Sheets really easily, you could go ahead and pull them in that way. But in this case, I'm going to create a rubric from scratch here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Rubric, and it's going to open up my rubric creation window because everything has its own window. All right, so first thing I notice is that underneath where I have my directions here, I have the option to use scoring, so I can turn that on or off. So if I don't want to use scoring, I just want to give them categories. Like you did an excellent job here, I could turn it off. I left it on because I wanted it to automatically calculate a grade, which was nice. And then underneath that, this is where I changed whether the high score ends up on the left or the right. So if I have it on ascending, it'll start with my low score and move up from there. And then descending is what I had before. Okay. I do have 3 dots. Anytime you have 3 dots, click on them. So if I decide I don't like this rubric after I've created it, I can delete it using those 3 dots. Okay, so that's the 3 dots up next to sample assignment. You'll notice that we have 3 dots in a lot of different places in this rubric, so we'll explore those too, promise. And then as we're building our rubric, we can see how many total points are in our rubric based on this number in the top right-hand corner here. That will change as we add rubric categories and criterion. All right, so let's go ahead and start building. Your criterion are like those categories. So in the one that I had here, my criteria here, I had main character, I had problem, cause. So these are like I guess the names of the different categories you might have in a rubric. Oop, that's my old one. Where's the one okay, there we go. So in this case, I might have something like presentation. So we're just looking to make sure it looks nice. Okay, so that might be my category here. I can give it a description. How, I don't think the word professional really works, but how professional does your assignment look? This is a terrible rubric already, bear with me. Okay, so just kind of a description based on what I put here. I could put what are the different things I'm looking for overall here. In mine, when I created this one, I based it off of my anchor chart that I posted on this assignment. And so it was one of those like, this is actually linked to it. Let's open it. Somebody wanted but so then. So it was that kind of a summary. And so in my rubric, I put the name of the criterion as main character and then somebody, and then this is the description I gave. So then the next one was here's the criterion, here's the description I gave. Just so you can kind of see what that looks like on a finished rubric. And then on ours, We now want to go ahead, and after we've given it a description, we want to give it some different point values in levels. So again, in mine, we were looking at excellent, good, fair, and needs improvement. You can put whatever you want for those terms. So this title might be, you know, exceeds expectations, or whatever your rubric might start with. And then you can give it a point value. Again, mine is descending, meaning I want my high first, and then it will go down from there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a 5. Okay. And then I would go ahead and give, what does it mean to get exceeds expectations here? And now I can add, here's the next level. If I didn't get a 5, maybe I got a 4, and that was, okay. And again, here's what I would need to do to get that. And I can keep on going here and add a 3, a 2, etc. Okay, so these are my different point values that I could give for that one criterion. Underneath, notice I have 3 dots. Okay, my 3 dots underneath each level allows me to delete it. And then the other place we see 3 dots is next to where it says out of 5 here. This is a cool thing because it allows me to take, here's this one set of criteria that I have here, and now I want to duplicate it so I have the same wording, the same points. It kind of fills in all that information. I just need to change, okay, this one's no longer presentation, this is now content, and then I'll give it a description. And now I would just need to come in and change, what does it mean to get a 5 in content? What does it mean to get a 4, etc. Okay, so copying that, duplicating that is really easy. It's the 3 dots next to where you're entering your criterion title, and then duplicate. If I want to start from scratch, I could also just add a criterion at the bottom, and it will bring up that menu that we were looking at before. Notice though that I have to then put in all of the different points and keep adding levels. So not super ideal. All right. That's our rubric creation. When I'm done creating my rubric, I have it the way I want it. I'll just click on that save button and it will attach. Here's this rubric. It's attached now to this assignment. It gives me a little snapshot. I have 2 main criteria and then it's worth a total of 10 points. All right. That was building it from scratch. Questions or things you want me to repeat in building from scratch? All right. Awesome. I just want to remind you that we also, I'm going to delete this one. Whew. We also had the option again to import from Sheets, and it's just going to ask you to pull in a file, a rubric file that you already have in your Google Sheets library here. So I'm looking in my Google Drive specifically for Google Sheets, and then if I had a rubric created, I could add one here. So I'm not sure I fully understand this question. If I use one I already have, it won't change the original. Are you talking about one that you already have in Google Sheets? I don't believe so. I'm not 100% though. So let me go ahead and I wonder if I can just find a rubric out there because I haven't actually pulled one in. So let me just quickly make one in Google Sheets. I'm just going to copy what I have on my other one. Come on. All right, so my points are excellent. Okay, I'm just gonna do the beginning of one, not the whole thing, I promise. All right, I'll just do one category and we'll just kind of hope for the best. Okay, so let's see what happens when we pull that in on this assignment. So I'm going to import from Sheets. I'm going to use my sample rubric. And there is an error. Let's see what my error says. Nothing. So I'm not really sure what the error is there and what that means. I'll have to do some research on that to see what it requires, because I have not actually imported one from Sheets. So let me do some research and get back to you on that to see A, what it requires your Google Sheet to look like, and B, what happens next. Is it going to ask you to change it or things like that? So like I said, I will do a little Google searching later and see what I can find. All right. Okay, so that is adding rubrics, attaching rubrics, grading on a rubric, all of that. What other questions do you have about rubrics aside from the question that I'm going to research and get back to you about? And I'm writing that full question out. Okay. All right. Well, then let's look at that last thing on our agenda. And this is the one. So I was trying to get my iPad or my iPhone at this point, either one, to attach or to share its screen with Zoom, and it kept giving me an error. So I had to do some kind of workarounds to get it to work, and I'm hoping I can get it to work to share on my screen right now. So we're going to try. Bear with me for a second. See if I can get it to work. Of course, I don't see it. What is going on? There it is. Okay. Are you seeing something that looks like a phone? Do you see something that looks like a phone on the screen? Can you just let me know? Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, thank you. Okay, good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull up the Google Classroom app, which if you haven't already downloaded it, it's free to download in your App Store, both for Android devices and for your Apple devices. Okay, and I'm going to try to go this way so that you can see nicely. Now you're going to have to kind of bear with me. You are going to have that watermark on there, which is kind of annoying. All right, so the first thing I want to look at in your app. Okay, so it's going to land you on your classes page that looks like this. Once you're in the app, the first thing we're going to talk about are the notifications. So if you want to receive push notifications for when your kids do certain things, we can do so by going to those 3 lines in the top left corner. So I don't know if I can show you that, I guess with my mouse. These 3 lines up here. Okay, so I'm going to click there. And then I'm going to scroll all the way down. I have a lot. And we're going to find the one that says settings. So we've been playing in our settings within a specific class. We haven't looked at our settings for all of Google Classroom. We're going to do that right now. I'm going to go all the way down there. I'm going to click on settings. And these are the different settings I have available to me in the app. Okay. I want to look at notifications here. So one of our options is notifications. I'm going to select that. Your email notifications, that first option, that's not going to matter. So again, we get those notifications by default sent to our @teachers.fwisd.org email, but because we can't access it, we never see them. So you can leave it on or off. It doesn't really matter. But the one underneath that talks about class notifications, and we'll kind of dig into that in a second. The device notifications is the one that you want to make sure this is enabled if you want to receive those push notifications. If it's disabled, which I think, so when I click on that, it will bring me to my iPhone, in this case, settings, and I can go into my notifications. Again, sorry about that big watermark in the middle, but I want to make sure that they're allowed. Okay, so I have them allowed. I'm going to go back to Classroom by clicking on that Classroom. And then apparently not. Okay, I'm back in Google Classroom now. It's enabled. And now I can come down and decide which things do I want to receive notifications for. Do I want to receive notifications every time somebody comments? Every time somebody's comment mentions me? Do I want to receive notifications for private comments? That one I would probably leave on. And then you also have all these options for things you're enrolled in. From your student perspective, they have the same ability. So you may want to let them know that on their phone, they can go in and download the app, and then they'll get notifications every time you post assignments for them. So that's a really cool thing. For you, it's not super helpful, but for them as students, that's helpful. Down below that, though, is where you have some more options for classes that you're teaching. So do you want to see every time somebody submits something late? Do you want to see every time somebody resubmits something? Invitations to co-teach, and then when your scheduled posts have failed or published. So lots of different push notifications you could receive through the app as long as you have them enabled. In our class notifications, this is where you can go in. So that was my second option here underneath email notifications. I can decide which ones of these classes do I want to receive notifications for, because I don't want to receive them for every class. Like, I'm a teacher in all sorts of classes that I don't actually have anything to do with. So different teachers who have added me, which is awesome, but I don't want to receive all their notifications. So I can turn them off, so I'm only receiving notifications from specific classes. So that's really helpful. Let me go ahead and go into my student account here. I'm gonna resubmit this work and let's see if it will give me notifications. Sometimes, just as a quick note, word of caution, Google Classroom sometimes is slow. So that app on your phone may not give you an immediate notification. It might take a minute. We're waiting. And I don't have a notification yet. So eventually it will pop up with a notification, but maybe not while we're sitting here, which is not ideal. But a lot of complaints that I get from teachers is that they never know, like they don't know that a student has submitted something late without knowing to look for it. And so this is a possible solution for you if you hear that from your teachers. I know a couple of you are either data people or coaches or things like that within your school. So if you hear other teachers saying, I want notifications, but I can't get them in my email, let them know that they can get that information in an app. The other really cool thing about the app is that it allows you some more freedom in giving student feedback. So I'm going to go back into that demo class where I have that book summary assignment. So that's that assignment that was turned into me with some plagiarism. Okay, I'm going to go to that student work and I want to look at this student's again. So that was the one that was copied and pasted about packs. So I'm opening up the student work on my phone. And again, I wish this watermark wasn't here. But with my phone, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner, I have that little pencil icon. I can click on that pencil icon. All right, and now it gives me these drawing tools. Kind of beware that I'm going to zoom. I'll try to move it down. So, apparently not. I want to move that down underneath. I can't get it underneath the watermark, so you'll have to bear with me. But with this, I can go ahead and I can write or draw with my finger. I can highlight things with my finger. And this would be a lot easier to do on a tablet. My iPad, for whatever reason, wasn't allowing me to connect. So I was planning on showing with my iPad. I have a stylus too that would have made this really easy. But I can go ahead and I can mark it up with the pen. I have a marker tool. I have the highlighter. And I even have a text tool where I can type. So all of this allows me to give some feedback to the student. And then when I'm ready to send that to him, I'm going to save it in that top right corner. And notice that it's saving it as a PDF. It's behind the watermark on the screen, but you'll see that PDF version. Okay, that's saved. And so, I did not want to do that. Let me go back. All the way back. Can't go all the way back in Google Docs. That's in a different program. There we go. All right, and so I'm going to leave that attachment there. I'm going to return this back to him, and notice, actually, before I do that, notice that it attached that edited PDF underneath. So when I return that back to him, okay, give it a second. Let's go back to that student work now and refresh his page. All right, he now has this extra attachment here. So he can open that attachment on that student end here, and he can see all of the feedback that I left for him using those different tools that I had on my phone or tablet. Okay, so some different functionality within the app versus what you can do on the computer. So really cool thing that students are able to do. All right. So those were the two big things we were going to talk about with using the mobile app. Are there questions that you have about the mobile app and how that works? Okay. Keep in mind that when you download the mobile app, it is going to prompt you to log in with your Google credentials. That's when you want to make sure you use your @teachers.fwisd.org domain name. And then for your students, they'll be prompted that same way. They can use their @students.fwisd.org to log into Google Classroom on the app. All right. So with that said, I am done with our agenda's worth of content. I know that I had promised to go back and look for that student-to-student plagiarism. So I'm going to pause. What questions do you have for me? Be thinking about that. And then while you're thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and see if we can demo that. Wonder if I already have a class. I'm going to look and see what classes my other student accounts are in. None of test class. There we go. Okay, so this is a great one to try. All right, so I'm going to push an assignment out in this. And I'm just going to attach a random document. Ooh. I'm going to turn on my Originality Reports. Okay. So I'm just getting it all set up right now. Make a copy for each. Let's go ahead and I'm going to push that out as is for now. All right, and so now I'm going to go in as my first student here. And I'll add something to that assignment. Need something specific. Oops. All right, and I'm going to turn that in. Okay, so Zoe's is turned in. Got it. And now let's test it on Lane's account. Okay, so now I'm on my second student here. So again, we're testing. This is very exciting. And I don't think I'm in the right one still. Let me try that one more time. There we go. And I want that same, I should have copied what she just did. Bear with me as I copy her text. I'm going to paste it in his. Okay. And before I even turn it in, let's see if it'll let me catch it right now. So I'm going to run his originality report. Moment of truth. It says no matches found, so I don't think it will. I'm not feeling confident. I'm turning his in. And let's check from the teacher end just to make sure both students have turned theirs in. I'm going to open up student 1 here. And notice it says no flagged passages. So no, it is not finding the plagiarism in that student-to-student work. So that's unfortunate. It would be cool, but maybe one day. All right, so with that said, We have officially reached the end. I know that I have a question to research, which I won't hold you here for while I do that, but I will email if I find a good answer to your question. In the meantime, here is our webinar attendance link. And then it is Friday, so that's it for this week. I already sent my schedule for next week in an email earlier today. We do have fewer webinars coming up next week, just because we've kind of hit almost everything, at least for now. There are a couple of new ones, though. We're going to talk about Go Formative as a whole webinar. So if you were with me yesterday, we talked about how we ran out of time. Originally, I was going to combine Go Formative with Pear Deck, but I'm worried again I'm going to run out of time. So I made Go Formative its own webinar and then Pear Deck its own webinar. So those are our two new ones next week, and then we'll do some repeats of some others. I did also leave Friday as an open slot. So I'm not sure what else you need. So if you have suggestions, things you really want to see, let me know. Or even if it's something you'd like repeated, let me know, and I'll take that feedback and decide upon Friday's topic based on what I hear. So yes, that is it. If you are done with that webinar attendance link, you are welcome to go about the rest of your Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and hopefully I'll see you at some point next week. If you have further questions, though, please feel free to stay. I'll hang out for just a couple minutes until everybody else has left.